We're recording.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the December 4th meeting of the Hyde Park Planning Board. Please take note of all the exits around the room in case of emergency, and now join me as we salute the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is a continued public hearing for Dollar General. Applicants are proposing an entirely new store to be located at 1 East Dorsey Lane. This is at the corner, the intersection of Dorsey and 9G. May I get a motion to reopen the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Do you guys want to come and present anything? I didn't mean that to make it sound as though we are all tired of seeing it, by no means.
They have samples. We want to see samples. Yes.
A couple of quick updates. So good evening. For the record, I'm Karen
Oh,
Majanowski
Mike,
from Bowler Engineering.
you need the mic.
For the record, I'm Karen Majanowski from Bowler Engineering, here with Ken Fioretti from HSC Hyde Park LLC this evening, the potential future owner and contract purchaser of the property and developer of the proposed Dollar General store. Since we met with the planning board last at the beginning of October, we met with the zoning board, who held a public hearing for an area variance for scale as proposed, and we did obtain that area variance from the zoning board for scale last month. So the plan remains the same as the board last saw it, as far as the size of the building and parking quantity, size, and configuration goes. We had made a change to the proposed right-in only access off of Violet Avenue to really sharpen that angle so that vehicles coming southbound on Violet Avenue, Route 9G, are restricted from being able to make an illegal left turn into the site. We also changed the shape of the sidewalk around the existing utility pole on East Dorsey Lane and made some stormwater changes as well, which are reflected in our latest SWIP. As a reminder, this is the proposed architecture that's here. We were asked to bring a sample of that brick wainscoting at the bottom of the building, so I have that here for your comment and feedback on that as well. Otherwise, I think we've come a long way with the building, and we had it at a very, I think the board was pleased with the point we were at with the architecture, and we're very excited about it as well, and I know our client is. They're very proud of the project that we have proposed here.
You should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Looks fun.
Anything else? So Karen did a great summary, noting that the ZBA, including our recommendation, gave the area variance. I did not realize that we'd asked for a sample for the brick fascia, but that's great to know. If you want to pass it up, everybody can take a quick look. We have a resolution prepared tonight. The applicant made the final changes for the most part that we requested. That's why there are going to be some conditions listed. But I want to say first, it's been a pleasure working with you and Bowler Engineering. Your responsiveness to the board has been 100%. That applies to you, Mr. Fioretti, as well, and your company. It's been a pleasure working with you guys from start to finish. This, I think, is going to represent a huge improvement over the structure that's there now. Certainly, the landscaping and layout that's there now, this will be a huge improvement. I think this also is going to set a standard you're going to find. Just so you know, if you propose any more Dollar Generals, you may sound people in other towns when we want the Hyde Park version, because that happens already with our Mavis. And our Rite Aid and our McDonald's.
And Dunkin' Donuts.
Dunkin' Donuts, they all ask for the Hyde Park version, so you may be asked for that as well. But this is a beautiful building that I think that all of our residents will be proud of, and I want to congratulate the board as well for working with the applicants in a friendly, harmonious fashion, as well as the consultants, which leads me over to Ms. Axelson. Comments?
Just to pretty much ditto what you said, responsiveness on your part of the applicant folks, and also the board really got into this, and I think that's why it's quality.
Thank you. Mr. Sotero?
No comments. All our final items are included in the resolution.
I'll also thank you for working to resolve with the DEC the quote-unquote fill issue. I think that'll be important moving forward for other projects we might have where there's been disturbance that's decades and decades old. Mr. Logan, any comments from you?
Nothing new.
As you've seen, we have a resolution prepared which has a number of conditions that hopefully address everything remaining that the board still has questions about.
And since I'm being Chip and Dale, let me thank you for working on the resolution on a dime, because as the board will know, when we looked at the paper copies of the new submission, there were some lighting foot candles shown that were really excessive, like to the brightness, that made magnitude of maybe even Las Vegas type, or where you would see like a, big an interstate intersection, that kind of thing. And Ms. Modulowski sent it over to the other architects who got it down lickety-split. They reduced the number of soffits, and I'm not really sure how those numbers ever got calculated in the first place. I've never actually seen a 26 and a 32. They'd be really bright. So, I mean, the site average is now down to 0.3, where it was before at 2.1. So I think we're going to be satisfying everyone there as well. Comments from the board? From my left, any?
No comments, just thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing this moving forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Pickett?
Glad to see you move forward. Thank you.
I think it's going to be a great project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking forward to breaking ground on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I look forward to your next project here.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Would any member of the public like to speak? Either one of the gentlemen present? Nope. Okay, then may I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Who has this resolution?
I do. Town of Hyde Park Planning Board, resolution granting conditional site plan approval, Dollar General, 1 East Dorsey Lane, December 4th, 2019, resolution number 2019-04, whereas now therefore be it resolved that the planning board hereby approves the site plan and authorizes the chairperson or his authorized designee to sign the site plan set after compliance with the following conditions. 1, payment of all fees in escrow. 2, the revision of sheet 9 of the site plan set to label the proposed sidewalk surface and corresponding landscaping lawn near the semicircular path of the sidewalk along East Dorsey Lane north of the proposed driveway. 3, revision of the site plan set to delineate with meets and bounds and label a public access easement for the portion of the sidewalk along East Dorsey Lane north of the proposed driveway that is now proposed for the site, which portion is not within the public right-of-way ROW. Provide notation referring to sidewalk easement agreement. 4, approval by the planning board attorney of a public access easement for the portion of the sidewalk that is not within the public right-of-way, ROW, including a meets and bounds description. 5, revision of the site plan set to include a notation referring to a sidewalk maintenance agreement for the length of the sidewalk proposed within the New York State Route 9G and Dutchess County Route 40 rights-of-way. 6, approval by the planning board attorney of a sidewalk maintenance agreement for the lengths of sidewalk proposed within the New York State Route 9G and Dutchess County Route 40 rights-of-way. 7, revision of the site plan set to include any New York State Department of Transportation required elements for work within its ROW, and conceptual approval by New York State DOT for said improvements. 8, proof of submission of any required documents or revisions to Dutchess County Department of Public Works for work within its ROW, and conceptual approval for said improvements. 9, Dutchess County Department of Behavior and Community Health approval for methods of water supply and sewage disposal. 10, approval by the planning board attorney of a stormwater maintenance easement and agreement in favor of the town of Hyde Park for maintenance of all the project's stormwater facilities. 11, submission of a final stormwater pollution prevention plan, subject to approval by the planning board's consulting engineer and the town of Hyde Park stormwater management officer. 12, revision of sheet 2 of the site plan set to include the following note. There, quote, there shall be no enclosed storage of goods and materials for sale except as permitted by the town of Hyde Park zoning law, section 108-4.3b, which may require a site plan amendment, end quote.
Second?
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to clarify condition number 12. I think we have a lot of work to do with 1 through 11, and we're prepared to do so and can do that. And I just want to make sure that I'm clear on number 12. So on the site
Number
plan-
12 doesn't really affect you in terms of me signing.
What's that?
Number 12 doesn't really affect you in terms of getting my signature on.
On the
All you have to do is add that note. In other words, you're allowed under our code to do storage outdoors of a building. All storage, anything that's sold or supposed to be sold within a building. There are sections of the code that allow you to do storage of materials to be sold outside. They're contained in two sections, both referenced in there. So if you did want, at some point, if your tenant wanted to, say, sell swimming pools, et cetera, if the zoning administrator discovers that it's not per those two sections of code that allow outdoor storage for sales, then she would likely do a notice of violation and require a site plan amendment. Does that make any sense to you? Maybe not.
Yes, and I just want to, I guess, further clarify. So what we're proposing to do is to sell items during business hours and then bring them inside the store rather than store them outside.
Which I
in
believe,
non-business
and the way
hours.
Under the code, that can happen as long as they're taken inside.
Yes, I just want to clarify
Yeah.
that. Are you
That's
okay
what the other store
The other
does.
store does take, not everything. They sometimes chain stuff in, which we've heard from the fire, I've heard from the fire department that that's an unsafe thing to do, to leave merchandise out, chained up, in case of fire. In case of fire, they can't access it easily and it loses merchandise. So,
Yeah,
Is it-
the concern that I had.
Could you
was
please
there
use
was
the
this-
microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. The only question or concern where it says no unenclosed storage of goods or materials for sale, I had the feeling that you wanted some sort of fencing or some sort of.
that's what the two sections that do allow storage of materials, storage of items or materials to be sold outside has to be fenced.
So does that mean that you would need to see a fence if they had some merchandise that was for sale, like what the store does is they bring merchandise out when they open up seasonal items? Would that need to be in a fenced area in front at the main
If
entrance?
it's brought in each night, no.
I'm sorry?
If it's brought in each night, the answer is no.
It's brought in each night, but anything left overnight?
Would ultimately need to be somehow enclosed.
Okay. And then I guess the question is, when it says may require a site plan amendment,
That would be up to the zoning administrator at that time, given what you're proposing.
So in
Reason
other
why
words,
we-
if you needed a fence around it, a fence is a site plan element. So you'd have to come in and show where would the fence be, what would it look like?
no, I understand, I'm just trying to wrap it.
Yeah.
In other words, it may not, so
under
under our code, the zoning administrator has the ability to say something is de minimis if there's a change that's required. So if you said, well, we're going to sell something that's non-seasonal, it's going to stay out all the time. If a complaint were made and Tad followed up and said you're in violation of your approved site plan because this is not enclosed, she could require a fence around it. That noted, she could also say it's minimal and not requiring a site plan amendment by the board. What she usually does in these cases is get a thing of tracing paper, put it over the approved plan set where the fence would be, and that would become part of the record.
Okay, but I just want to make sure that this isn't limiting the store's normal operations, such as, as we're talking about right here, which is to say that, in the normal course of business, nothing that's being left out overnight is going to be subject to.
Storage would be something that's, in other words, is
No, no,
stored
outside,
outside, over
merchandise offered
time.
for sale only during business hours, and nothing left out when the store is closed. Obviously, if anything was left out when the store was closed, it'd probably be walking away on its own there. But the concern is just that that we're putting a restriction on Dollar General's operations that they typically aren't accustomed to or, would have a problem with.
So let me try that again.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to
I'm just
keep,
like, we
you're
got
not
this
allowed
late
to
today.
store merchandise outside.
Okay.
Store does not mean bring it out, bring it back in. Store means leaving it outside.
I understand.
If they want to leave it outside and and someone makes a complaint, that could be a violation. I'm just telling you what could be. I'm not telling you what will happen. I can't,
What if they're in the normal course of business, they're bringing merchandise out for sale, taking it in, nothing's being stored outside.
Right,
it's
that's
just,
That's
that's
fine.
not an
That's
issue
fine.
here.
Right.
correct, because
That
it's not
would-
being stored.
Okay, I just want to make, because it's gonna, I don't want to accept something here that's gonna come back and bite us at some point in the future. I mean, and may
Again,
require-
the issue is that some of the stores, and again, I don't know how, I'm not responsible for how corporate tells people to run, each manager how to run the stores. Some of the stores leave merchandise out at night, and they put a big padlock and chain around it, and that's something that we don't want to see in this location.
Is that, does Dollar General do that at their other store?
Not that I know of here, but I can tell you that they
Yeah.
do it at the one in Amenia.
Okay.
There's a lot more merchandise outside in Amenia.
I'd also like to add, this condition is basically a summary of the requirement that is in the zoning law already. So even if this note weren't added, you would still be subject to this requirement.
I I understand that.
Okay.
I'm just concerned where it says which may require a site plan amendment. I just don't want, somebody coming back and saying, well, why do we have to go through a site plan amendment because we've got an operating store here?
Typically, if you were coming to do this, it would be, in other words, after a violation. I can't quite explain that to you enough.
No.
If a complaint is made that there's unenclosed storage of merchandise, the zoning administrator has the ability to then notify first of an apparent violation. Then, if it's not corrected or addressed, then go through the actual process of going to court for a violation to pursue.
Okay.
If that was necessary, and there was such a big area that was being utilized for storage, I'm guessing that TAB would say as part of a settlement, you have to come through for a site plan amendment to show where this is going to be stored. Specifically because you're facing a residential building, residences across the way, and out and enclosed storage. There's two sections. One is talking about a fence. The other actually gives you a location where it would have to be, and it has to be particularly screened from residential uses.
Okay, and at the risk of sounding redundant, if the language is simply to reiterate the existing ordinance, why would it be necessary at all? If the ordinance is in place and you have to abide by the ordinance, why do you need language that says you have to abide by the ordinance if the ordinance is already in place?
It's a means of ensuring that applicants are aware of this specific requirement. It also establishes that this site plan is affirmatively subject to this requirement and is not in any way waived.
Okay, but wouldn't it have to be waived in order for it to not apply?
It is preventing the argument.
It's actually just making sure that the tenant understands that they can put stuff outside as long as they bring it back in.
Okay. All right,
I mean, you could even, I'm not going to do it for you, even though I've already started. You could make the argument that it's within an enclosure because of the way you've designed your vestibule, if you keep things within there.
Which
But-
is where the merchandise would be displayed.
That's what I was going to say, but I don't think the town or anybody in the planning board would want to see merchandise strewn out all on a sidewalk that would prohibit people from being able to walk in easily.
Right.
That's where I'm talking where you're getting into violations. So, again, it's, part of this is, it's being affirmative, as Mr. Logan stated, so that the applicant is aware, or the tenant, I should say, is aware that you can do certain things, but you just can't let it spill out everywhere all night long.
Mhm.
Because that's what storage involves, is not bringing something out, it's storing it so that it's out continuously.
Okay, so there's no additional requirements to put up any kind of fencing, any sort of?
Nope, unless they
violate
a violation
this-
occurs, yep.
And the way the ordinance is written, their operation is not, the way we've described their business falls within the ordinance.
Sure.
Okay.
You know, I think it's sort of silly, as you said, for people to leave merchandise out all night, but different stores, as I've observed in different parts of the county, operate differently. Literally, the Dollar General, if you haven't seen it in Amenia, it's not worth you driving by because it's pretty hideous. But they have a good parking lot of merchandise outside. I don't think there's room inside the store to bring it all back in. Not making any sense now. They apparently overbuy, so they leave it out. Amenia doesn't really, it has a sort of
Normal
small town center without many stores, and so when you drive, there's just two roads. When you drive by, you pretty much see it. Now, it's really, really, really well lit, so I think they're not worried about theft, and it's a pretty sleepy town. But I don't think that's something that in this area you'd want to have, because this is much more high traffic.
Okay.
I don't think that you're going to have any safety issues there. You have a well-lit church and school operating right across from you, where the lights stand pretty much till the wee hours. But I don't think you want to encourage this in this kind of area of leaving a lot of merchandise out.
Okay.
That's really where it comes down to.
Fair enough. All right, I'm satisfied.
And again, if a fence were required, that'd be going through a process with the zoning administrator, not the planning board. She would make that
And we would have
determination.
addressed it by now if it was going to be required.
That's what I think, yes, and that's why I sent this over to you at noon today, or 1 o'clock, sorry, when we finally had a final version, so you could take a look at it if you had any questions.
And that's the only reason that I've been working this as much as you've had a chance to review it, and I kind of got it after the fact, and,
I pretty much reviewed it I reviewed it within an hour and sent it back out. Trust me,
Yeah.
you can ask Mr. Logan and Ms. Axelson.
You had an hour more than me.
I should have had your email, I could have forwarded it to you too. I'm sorry, I thought that
Not a
Ms.
problem.
Majanowski would send that over to you.
All right.
And just, the board has done this on other types of operations where there's something in the code, but it's worth it to just make note of how things should be done according to the code.
Yeah.
And it makes it easier for whoever is the applicant or who ends up running the business, as well as the zoning administrator, to have it right there
Okay,
on one big plan sheet.
I understand. All right, I'm satisfied.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstains or nays? Motion carries unanimously.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And have a great holiday ahead.
Same to you.
Yes, you
Happy
too.
New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year.
The next and last item on the agenda is a site plan waiver for Kevin and Hilary Van Noorstrand. This is for property located at 5 Parker Avenue. The applicants are making a small rear addition at the house. This is not visible from either one of the historic sites. It's also not visible from the river. It's actually not even visible from Route 9. We have a recommendation from the zoning administrator to do a site plan waiver. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Nope.
Mr. Pickett, you have this file?
I do. Kevin Van Nordstrom, 5 Parker Avenue, site plan waiver, resolution 2019-60. Whereas a request for site plan waiver has been made to the Town of Hyde Park Planning Board by Kevin Van Noorstrand for the small rear addition and interior renovations on a single-family home requiring a building permit, and whereas, therefore be resolved that the Town of Hyde Park Planning Board hereby waives the site plan requirements for the proposed changes as described in the building permit received by the Building Department November 15, 2019, and per the request to the Planning Board dated November 25th, 2019.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. Making a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks,
Aye.
everyone.